Blog Talk Radio.
Hello, everyone. This is me, Jonathan Alexander. I'm here to host our show, Life, Laughter, Happiness. Today, we have our guest. I'm not sorry. My co-host Kelly. Are you there, Kelly?
Yeah. Hi.
Hi. Okay. And this is the morning for me, so I just woke up, so it might sound a little tired, but I'm fine. And this is we have our second co-host, Barbara. Are you there, Barbara?
Yes. Hi, everyone.
Okay, great. And now our guest today is Chris Newland. Now it says here that you grew up in an 80-acre cattle farm that bordered a paper mill that had a 70-acre dump.
Yes, that's correct. And the dump leaked into the farmland, and it's a centennial farm, or nearly a centennial farm. And so we recently found out what the contamination was through a hard fight with Michigan's Department of Environmental Quality. They were forced to test. They didn't want to test, but they were forced to do it by the government. And when they did, we found what was called PFAS contamination from the paper mill, and the waste doesn't break down in nature, and it's got adverse health effects.
Okay. Do you have anything to add to that, Kelly?
Well, how did you get started? Like, how did you realize that there might be a problem?
Well, because of the discoloration in the ponds. The ponds have always been brown, and we've been, when the mill was in operation, my father in 1984 complained about it, and the government said, told the paper mills, you don't have to clean that up. And we've been downplayed ever since for over 40 years. I tried in 92 to bring it to light, but I didn't have any media exposure, and nobody really at that time was interested in it. So this has been going on for 40 years, and the discoloration of the ponds is the key thing that said something's not right here. And the dead trees that line the pond tells you that something poisonous was there.
Oh, wow.
Wow.
The ponds look like coffee, and it just happens that there was a joint. The pond cuts across the property line on both sides, so it's kind of quirky how that happened, but that's the way the thing was built.
Wow.
And so your father was complaining about it. Were all the neighbors noticing, and what did they do about it back then, if anything?
Well, you got to understand, this is rural farmland, so there's not a lot of houses back there. We have 80 acres. The neighbor has an adjoining 120. The other one has 300, and it sits in the middle of all this. So there aren't a lot of people that see it. And I was just one of the few witnesses that saw this in the 70s, and I was 10 years old in 1974. So time has gone and time has passed, but my memory's still vivid of what I saw.
Wow. Did you see them dumping
still going on?
What's sad about it is the government gave permission for this dump to be turned into a compost facility, and this stuff can leak into the compost facility, and then it's trucked across the state of Michigan, or it's taken to Indiana and Ohio and sold in retail shops, like yard mulch. And so you could be buying something that has contamination issue. And I think this is how the government was going to handle the pollution issue there. Let's turn it into a composting facility, and we'll just spread it all over the state of Michigan, and nobody will pick up on it.
Wow.
Oh.
Because they sponsored this company out there and got them started in it. And there's 22 of these companies in the state of Michigan that do this, that turn industrial waste into compost.
Ooh.
And they're just spreading it and spreading it.
Yeah, 4 paper mill companies on the list, and the rest are food processing companies. Food waste isn't bad, but when you start taking paper waste and turning it into compost, there's a lot of bad things that can happen out of that.
And then that's turning into our food. And so what is being done about this right now?
Well, they want to minimize. They don't want to get the town alarmed because of property values and businesses, and there's a lot of dirty polluters out there, and they put a lot of political pressure on the system not to tell the story. And our environmental quality division seems to buckle under and doesn't want to tell the story and wants it snuffed it out. And that's the fight. You have to fight to get the documentation. You have to fight to prove everything. And they do not make it easy.
Wow.
They don't want to help. They don't want to find anything because that means work.
Ooh.
So it's a battle. It's a constant battle with them. If I get documentation, I have to pay for the documentation to do a research search, and so it costs money to do a Freedom of Information request.
Wow. So we need to post where we can to let people know where we can sign any kind of petition or help out or expose this further and help you with the fight.
It's usually done. Each state has their own Department of Environmental Quality. Ohio has an EPA. They just call it different names. But it falls on deaf ears with them. They answer to people in Lansing. There's powerful people that control this agency, and they take orders from up top. So they don't talk about very bad things that happen in our area, and they just give it lip service. And
what do you think we could
awful
do
things have happened out there that I've found. Just god-awful things.
Like what?
Well, like the fact that cyanide waste in the neighboring town, a waste storage company or waste disposal company buried 5,000 barrels. In a town not far from here, another 1,000 barrels. A few miles away, they poured the stuff down the drains into the river. They brokered toxic waste and they got rid of it in this way. And our state does not want to tell that story.
Okay, I have a question. Now,
what are they doing about it? What are they doing about it at all?
Well, they buy the land. They buy the contaminated land around it because it got into the aquifer, and so it's state land. And they buy up parcels, and there's nothing they can. That's their defense. If they find it's contaminated, the state generally will take it off the market by buying the parcels of land, so it can't be developed.
So that's
I have a question. Now, Kelly, you live in Michigan as well. Have you experienced any of the things that he's talking about?
I know that we had parchment paper mills, parchment being not the actual kind of paper, but there's a little city of Parchment north of where I'm at, between here and Otsego and Plainwell area that he's talking about. And that is well known for having contaminated the river. And, I mean, my grandparents would, when they were alive, would tell of all kinds of weird things that would happen with that river and the things that would wash up and how you'd find a bunch of dead fish and, just all this waste stuff. And they did efforts to clean it, but there's only so much you can do when the stuff doesn't break down and it gets absorbed down into the drinking water level and things like that. So there have been times when you couldn't fish in the river because pollutants were so high. They would be in the fish, and then, they advise you not to eat it, because, people can, with repeated exposure, they can get cancer, they can die. But then you have to think of the food chain, and, eventually, something eats the fish or something out of there, and it moves on up the chain, and then people go hunting, and, then they're exposed to it because it doesn't break down. So a lot of bad things. And it used to smell really bad. But not all pollution does, and that's the scary thing. Like, if you go to Lake Michigan, I was like, oh, wow, look at all these little shells that are washing up. No, those are pieces of white plastic. So I've spent my time when I've gone to Lake Michigan and just picked up garbage and disposed of it because it's everywhere. I mean, it's not like, after a tsunami, it's not that obvious always, but it's just like you think, oh, look at these little white shells. Oh, that's plastic. It's that bad.
And are people coming down with a lot of diseases and cancer?
Oh, yeah, that's what spurred my town's study was we had thyroid cancers, reproductive health issues in women, ovarian cancer, thyroidism like you wouldn't believe, and some MS. And it spurred the CDC to push for an investigation, and the CDC pretty much worked with the public health department in trying to track down what's causing all this, because the numbers were alarming in our town. And this was about a year ago.
I have heard about that. I mean, that is very alarming. That's very sad.
Yeah.
I know whole families that have been wiped out by cancer or thyroid disease, or cancer clusters in a certain area of town. And whole families that have thyroid disease, that's unheard of.
Wow.
Yes, that is sad, and then carried down to their children and their children. So I'm glad you're getting the news out there more, and let's find a way to help and stop this from continuing.
Well, we get a lot of resistance because your local government doesn't want to find anything, because that pretty much kills their tax base, because they're not going to get new people coming in, so they resist. You have your real estate people who have a lot of money and a lot of money invested, don't want to find anything. And you have your local businesses that worry that their business is going to suffer if your town gets a bad name. Nobody's going to want to come to it. So you get a lot of political pressure not to find anything, and sometimes it's pretty mean-spirited.
Wow, it's a real big cover-up. It's a huge cover-up.
Yeah. I mean, if, I don't want to name like certain industries, but I would think, by name, like a certain restaurant or whatever, but I would think that if you have contaminated drinking water and you're making a food product or a medical grade product or anything like that that's directly going to go into the human body, you don't want to have that information exposed, because without spending several $1,000s to drill your well down lower or, something like that, you're not going to be able to continue doing, making products that people consume and still stay in business once they find out.
Well, they have city water, so they're like, no, our water's good. It's been tested. So most of these businesses are on city water, but your farms are not. And so you're going to be picking up contamination in your crops.
Yeah, and they aren't going to have the extra money laying around to fight it themselves individually.
No, it's my brother who runs the farm has spent thousands of dollars in fencing off the contaminated areas so his cattle don't get into these ponds or eat the grass around this area. And he milks. He does dairy. He wants to put out a good product. He doesn't want contamination in his milk.
Yeah.
Yes, and we feed that to our children. We're always wondering. We are shopping now for organic because of these kinds of things. So what are they finding in the animals if they're eating the grass and drinking this water? Are they having anything besides what people are having, like cancer and thyroids? Are they having like growth or any kind of deformity?
Yeah, growth. No, reproductive hazards in the animals, so they give a lot of stillbirths. They don't lactate properly. They lose their fur, and they get tumors. And that's kind of problem. Yeah.
Wow.
Prevalent farm animals, dogs, or any animal that gets in these ponds and these water sources tends to get sick from it.
Oh.
Very sad. And the fish, like Kelly was saying earlier, I mean, forget about that. So contaminated. Wow.
Yeah, there's a couple dairy farms. There's a couple dairy farms that are contaminated. I mean, one's in Maine, Kennebunkport, Maine. The same thing happened up there, and they did find PFAS in his milk. And then there was another dairy farm in New Mexico next to an Air Force base, and the PFAS levels were astronomical.
Wow.
So it can get into your milk supply, and kids can drink it, and then you get contaminated.
Wow. And you can't say you're going to be safe not having animal products because it can get into the crops that are growing.
Right. You're not even safe being a vegan.
No.
No, you're not. And this has happened before in Michigan in the 1970s with fire retardants that got into the milk supply, and it cost millions of dollars. And I think they put down over 30,000 dairy cattle, and they had to bury them in up in the upper Michigan. They were trucked at the upper away from everybody on Camp Grayling. And 30,000 cattle had to be slaughtered due to contamination. So this isn't the first time this has ever happened.
Well, and it's sad because we can't find these remote areas after a while because our population is growing and they aren't remote anymore. I mean, what are we going to do with all this?
Well, part of the problem is if we could document where this stuff happened, we could mark it. But since the DEQ really doesn't want to go out and do that because of political pressure, we've got all these time bombs hidden all over. And the only way to find it is when people get sick. And it's hard for individuals to prove, contamination.
I guess it must be hard. Maybe Kelly and you, Chris, both have seen this, but I mean, it's sad that you have to find out what you have to find out. You have to do something when people get sick. Don't you agree, Chris and Kelly?
Yeah, by then it's already too late. I mean, the damage is done to those people.
Or the next generation. Is it fair to the next generation that doesn't know anything about this? And they're wondering why they got sick or had health issues? Because our government waffled, our state government waffled on it and didn't want to be vocal of what happened. That's the problem I have, is tell the story, good, bad, or indifferent. Tell the story what happened.
Yeah, well, and it's got to, to properly clean it up, and I don't even know how you would do it. It would cost millions of dollars, and it has to come from somewhere. So that has to be a big concern, like why they would want to keep carrying on business as usual so they don't scare away tourism and, people aren't going to be, abandoning their lots and running, from there. It's a dangerous situation, and I can see that eventually with enough people being aware and enough pressure that they could do something, but in the meantime, it is going to hurt the economy. But what is the price if we don't do it? That's greater, but the money has to come from somewhere.
They don't want to admit that there's a problem. and they will do everything to keep it away from the general public. And you don't see a lot of media coverage, and I'm talking about political pressure on maybe some of our TV stations and stuff like that not to cover the story. So nobody knows because the story can't get out there. And that's bad in itself, too, when they have to resort to that tactic to keep it off the TV and stuff like that.
True.
Well, who in the government is taking care of this or looking at it at all, do you know?
Your health department. Your health department with small budgets. You have pockets of people that do really care. But as far as your state environmental quality division, no, because their voice is snuffed out from the top. Lawyers and PR people. The laws have been crafted not to protect the individual, but to protect the corporations, and that's sad.
Yeah,
it really is sad.
Because the corporations give money to the politicians, right?
Yeah. And so they craft the laws that protect them, and then they it takes a lot to sue them and to get stuff cleaned up. In some cases, some of these companies have gone bankrupt and have been out of business or out of state for years. And so they hire good lawyers, and they walk away from the mess that they created. And I don't think that's right either.
No.
But somebody's got to be held accountable.
Well, the thing that concerns me, too, is, okay, you've got them making compost, you've got them making, things for people to put in their lawns, for kids to be playing around in, and be totally unaware. But if they weren't trucking that around all over the place, spreading it, would it be more of a contaminant concentrated in a smaller area? Or is there a way that it can be spread so thin it would have less effect if it was trucked all over the place?
Well, that's what they tried to do. That's what they tried to do. They tried to spread it all over the state of Michigan so it wouldn't be detectable.
Would it be dangerous at those undetectable levels, or is it just as dangerous but slower to happen?
Well, I don't think the solution to pollution is dilution, and that's what they kind of did. Was, by spreading it all over the state of Michigan, it's really hard to, they can argue, well, it's below detectable levels or whatever, but that doesn't make it right. That's not the way to deal with an issue, by hiding it.
Right, and if it's, yeah.
That's
I mean,
the argument I got into with them when I found out what they were doing with the compost. And I'm talking millions of tons of this stuff got spread. Now, just a little bit, you're talking millions of tons. And when I asked, where did it go, I got stonewalled, and I said, we can't talk about it prior to 1995. And so they didn't want to cooperate on that point.
Well, and I've seen some of your documentation when you showed me, and like names, and I'm sure that's to protect, the innocent that don't know what's going on their property, but addresses and other vital information was blocked so that you're paying for information that tells you, yes, it's somewhere, but you don't know exactly where it's at because they don't want you to know, and they've blocked it out.
Yep, they block out a lot of it, a lot of addresses and things like that. But the funny thing is, they want me to brief them on, when I do have a finding, and I've had several, they want to be briefed and they want to photocopy, my stuff, and it's a one-way street. They don't cooperate with me, but when I find something that's relevant, then they want to hear about it, probably to defend themselves is the way they go about it.
Yeah, yeah.
And I just got a call in this morning. My health department's really interested in that stuff I showed you, Kelly. She wants a briefing, and my partner in this right now is calling the health department and probably setting up a meeting where I'm going to show her the maps of this stuff. because she didn't know that this existed. So it's kind of so. This happens every couple weeks. You know, you find some good information, but the point is, it took money to get this information to make this work. They just didn't give it to me freely. I had to fight to get this information, and it took months to get.
And it's coming out of your pocket. The testing is coming out of your pocket. None of this is easy.
This one cost $109 to get this information. So, and it was 1,800 pages.
Wow.
Wow. And I know you've told me like to test a site is like for one test is $250.
And that's cheap. That's relatively cheap to do that. You know, some tests can cost thousands of dollars.
So I can see why they're not readily jumping on that and saying, hey, let's do this, when it's going to cost them millions, if not billions of dollars to get the information, to get the testing, to get the permission to get on someone's land, to do all this, and then to have to clean it up because then they know about it. That's going to cost a lot of money.
They're very selective of what they test, too, and that's the sad part.
Oh, yeah, you don't get a whole picture.
No, they don't want to test anything that's going to go into the Kalamazoo River, which is going to go into Lake Michigan. They're not going to test any of that. So any stream that goes into the Kalamazoo River, they're not going to test.
Or something that's going to give somebody bad publicity.
Yeah, they just want it to be like in this little area. That's all we're going to look at. You know, that's all there is, and no worries, people. It's just in this little tiny place.
Yep, let's control the media so nobody knows about it. So, you know, I could call the TV station and say, hey, I've got 1,800 pages. You know what? They're not going to call me back anymore because pressure's building on them not to tell the story from somebody.
And it's probably corporate sponsors at that level. You know, they're sponsoring that TV newscast, and they're not going to want to look bad on it. I know you told me, like, there were different, I'm not going to name, like, who, but they were going to run your story, and then all of a sudden it got pulled. So
yeah, for a week they advertised my anchor story in January. West Michigan Man has great information. Sat down with me. I did an interview at my house with Fox 17 out of Grand Rapids. They advertise it to the public that I'm, you know, for a week to build up their ratings, and then they don't tell the story? That doesn't make much sense.
No,
With
no,
no
there's something
explanation
going
why
on.
the story got killed.
Yeah, something's happening.
Somebody made a phone call and killed the story.
Oh, my goodness.
Yeah. And I'm not a person to subscribe into conspiracy theories, but, you know, there's so much evidence here that something hanky's going on, that it's you know, once you know, you can't unknow the information.
And so, yeah, it's a war on various levels, you know, and but we do have a few people that do care. It's just they're waking up that the citizens were starting to speak out, and now there's an attempt to just snuff the story out or alter the words of the story or not give them lip service, and that's about it. And that's kind of sad in itself too.
Yes, it is. So do you do a lot of the studies yourself, and you do studies on the brain? Is this affecting people's brain and children's brains?
Yeah, well, it affects their whole body. I mean, you know, from cancer to brain tumors to all kinds of weird diseases, autoimmune diseases that are very rare. It's mostly cancer, diabetes, thyroidism, things like that, which are consistent with either dioxins or PFAS.
Well, and there's a lot of, like, childhood cancers in this area.
Yeah, they're astronomical. The rates are very high for kids out here.
And they don't say, oh, this is from this certain pollution, this contamination. They're not saying, oh, we're blaming it on this. They're just saying, well, this is what you have, and we don't know why.
They think it's from pesticides. He's trying, the CDC doctor is trying to link pesticides use to these diseases. And hopefully the soil testing that we're doing right now will give us some new information.
Well, I bet it would be easier to blame it on pesticides because, well, then just stop using that particular pesticide. And what about the people that are eating organic or they're growing their own food and they're not using it? Things are still happening to them, which wouldn't make sense if it was the pesticide only.
Well, and we're also working on that theory that they burned this pesticide near the city of Otsego in the early 80s, a pesticide that got burnt as fuel in a boilers to a paper mill that got sanctioned by the state to do this, and maybe possibly burning that pesticide, that smoke covered the city, and these people breathed it as young children. And now they have diseases growing up. But that's fallen on deaf ears. Nobody seems to want to jump on this yet. Even though we have the newspaper articles that it happened.
Oh, so there is documentation. It's just people are ignoring it.
Yeah, because that would say the whole town got contaminated, and because the state sanctioned this, can you imagine the ramifications if they gave them an air permit to do this? And this this came out that the state said this was okay to burn pesticides in the paper mill's boilers as a fuel source to get rid of the pesticides.
Wow.
That's what we're kind of working on now is did this happen? Did you use this as a fuel source? So
what can we do on the individual level? Like, can we do a GoFundMe? Can we, we're starting to spread it, the information by having you on our show. But what can we do to help the situation?
Well, that's what they did. There's a couple groups that researched this out, and one of the groups in Otsego did start a GoFundMe, and they raised almost $3,000 for testing. So they're gonna use that money to test in the area. The stuff that the state didn't want to test, the streams and stuff that go into the river, they're going to go out and they're going to test that and try to counter what the state didn't do. So they are on the right path with that. I'm just a different research group, but I will work with them occasionally. And I just have a couple partners that do this. And so we're kind of an offshoot of that group, but we're independent.
So I'm hoping that my friend who's a geologist and getting his master's in science, I'm hoping that he can join us so that we can figure out where the aquifers are and where the things are rolling downhill into other places. Because, you mentioned that I think you mentioned it before the show, so the listeners couldn't hear that part, but maybe you can explain it a little bit better, like if we have geologists on board that can help.
Well, they understand the aquifer system. They understand how that water's trapped underground and where it goes. And that would be huge to figure out the way the water flows and towards the city. Then you know exactly where to test. And that would prove contamination.
Okay. Yeah, I'm definitely going to be getting a hold of my friend Neil again and, seeing if he can meet us out there or if he needs to do some sort of surveillance himself or how we get started, because that's going to be huge. When we have the numbers, when we say this is the site right here, this is what's happening, this is where it's flowing, then that's going to be huge when we can map that out and say this is where it started and this is where it's at.
because this is public land and it's readily accessible. I know where the water stops and it goes into the ground. I just don't know where it exits. And that's the
once it's down
mystery.
There? Oh, okay. So you're talking, you know where it goes into the ground, but you're not sure where it stops after it's in the ground?
Yeah, where it exits.
Okay.
There's got to be an exit point before it gets into the Kalamazoo River.
Okay.
Or how it gets in the Kalamazoo River. At what point does it get into the Kalamazoo River? And so there's some. I've traced it up until that point. I just need to know where it goes after that. And if I can find that spot, that's where we'll test at, and we'll use GoFundMe money to do some testing in those areas.
Okay, that sounds good. So, yeah, I definitely am looking forward to having you back with the findings, and also, with that, when you get the information from when they're testing, people's health and, the clusters of different things. And, I'm glad that they're at least on board with that aspect, because that will tell us a lot.
I'm looking forward to giving you the tour up there, and you can actually see it with your own eyes. And once you see it with your own eyes, it really hits you hard.
Wow. I know I'd seen some pictures, and it was like there were places by the water where plants should readily be growing, but it looked like it was like old nuclear waste site. Like when you see pictures of that, it looked like scorched earth somewhat.
It was like Chernobyl back there.
Yeah,
it's kind of like
this isn't right.
No.
Yeah.
You can tell something's not right. It even has a smell to it after 40 years. It still has a sour smell to it.
Oh. Yeah, and nobody knows because it's back there. They don't see that.
They don't even put warning signs out. They don't even have a fence up around it. That's the bad part.
Oh, my goodness.
So kids can come by?
Yeah.
Wow.
And, when I was meeting with Chris before, he said that some of these parcels of land were sold off to make subdivisions where people have their kids out playing in their yard.
Yeah, they dumped on this and the mill immediately sold the property when they didn't need it and turned it into subdivisions now houses are on top of it, everything looks good, but it's had 8 years of contamination put on it in the form of bio-waste and sludge had been spread on the soil.
Wow. Chris, do you have any groups that we could join, or tell the listeners, do you have a social media group that we could join of any kind?
Yeah. There's you can check on Facebook, and it's called, I'll give them a plug, Justice for Otsego.
Okay, Justice for... I didn't
Justice
get that.
For Otsego.
Okay, thank you.
It's OTSEGO.
And they're on Facebook.
Okay, that's great. Then we'll get everybody to join that, and we'll just raise awareness how we can. But, wow, I would like to go out there and witness that. I want to see that, what's going on.
Yeah.
This is
so serious. This is like, I can't believe the huge cover-up that's going on with this. It's just so not right.
Well, it happened here. Where else did it happen at, So that's the point, because it's happened elsewhere. And it's sad. This is a remnant of our industrial past.
I have a question. Now, is this, how high is Michigan ranked as far as pollution is concerned? Amongst the states?
Well, in the industrial areas like Flint is terrible. Michigan was a very industrial city 40, 50 years ago. So we're ranked up there. We're ranked probably some of the worst areas because we just freely dumped into our rivers. Whatever they wanted to do, they just did.
We'll see.
And paper mills are some of the worst polluters, and we had a lot of paper mills.
I was thinking of Michael Moore, Roger and Me.
Oh. Huh.
He would be great. He would be great to cover a story like this.
And if we could get Matt Damon on board, he's a big environmentalist.
Michael Moore would be perfect for something like this because it's his home state.
Oh, gosh. Wow.
He would have an interest in this.
That's a good point. I didn't know that.
I just looked him up, and my sister and my brother-in-law, they're both big Michael Moore fans. They were watching, apparently, I think on their first date. Well, not sort of date. They met, but they were. It wasn't exactly a date. They sort of met, and they were watching Roger and Me, and there's a story about how they met. I'm not going to say it on the air, but it's just that they met and they were watching Roger and Me, and that was one of the things that they bonded with. I think it was. They're both staunch Democrats. They're both really liberal because Michael was very liberal, and that's how they bonded.
Well, whether you're a liberal or a Democrat or a Republican, pollution affects you either way. It doesn't discriminate.
That's true.
It doesn't discriminate whether you're black or white, young or old. Cancer will take you down. And drinking bad water is the worst thing that can happen to you, I think. Especially
repeated exposure. It's not like, somebody goes there, visits, and drinks bad water, and then they get it out, it's when you're living there and you don't know, and you just repeatedly get exposed to it, that it's really good. There's no way it can't take a toll.
But yeah, any person that's an activist would be welcome. I'd love to have. I wish I could get a hold of Erin Brockovich, and I've wrote her a couple times.
Oh yeah. Yeah.
Well, we will do what we can do. We'll tweet it out.
Go ahead. Thank you.
I guess the advantages of a show like this is instead of just writing a letter to Erin Brockovich, we can now say, "Can we interview you, Erin Brockovich?" That's just something that we have the advantage to be able to do. Does that make sense, everyone?
Yeah. Yes, and we can send this so she can listen too. We can send this out to anywhere. We can just keep sending and sending. I've already tweeted while talking right now, and just get the message out to a broader audience.
The bad thing about the mill in Otsego, they use one of the most toxic chemicals in Michigan's inventory list that's banned by the UN, and they put it into the aquifer intentionally to kill bacteria. And this has got a UN ban on it against maritime use, but it happened in Otsego, and this is what scares the DEQ. They will not tell this story about using tributyl tin. And it got pumped in mass down the private wells of the paper mill in the 1970s. And tributyl tin is so toxic, it will cause, it will scramble your DNA, and you'll pass it on to your kids.
Oh, my goodness.
Wow.
It's called epigenerational. So women that were exposed at 10 years old, that gave birth at 30, pass it on to their kids, and their kids are getting sick at 30. And it all traces back to tributyl tin that the mill used in 1973.
Oh, my word.
To kill bacteria.
Wow.
And that's the story I want told about. Tributyl-10 was used in mass and purged in the Kalamazoo River. And DEQ is so scared to tell that story. They do not want that story out.
Oh, that's going to have a huge backlash and ramification if that really, touches ground, takes off.
I hope at Talk Radio we'll talk about the dangers of tributyl-10. You could Google tributyl-10, and you can read about it, how bad it is. It screws up aquatic life like you wouldn't believe. And here it was used in Otsego, Michigan in 1973.
I wonder if NPR would be another good platform.
Any platform would be good. Any help to get the word out. That's the main thing. Get the word out that something bad happened.
Yeah.
To me, I think it's like Chernobyl. I call it ground zero out there, Chernobyl, because that's just how bad it is.
And it's scary because, Chernobyl, when it happened, was so public. There was no way to cover that up. It was huge. You could see it. This is scary because you can't see it. Yeah, you can't see it.
Yeah, and this had a cover-up by the state.
So it's almost worse.
It is, because it got into people's DNA, and they don't want to admit that it got into their DNA and caused autoimmune diseases. You can carry that with the rest of your life.
And I know so many people. Every time I talk to people, they have MS, they have lupus, they have, this, that, and the other thing, and sometimes they have multiple things, and it's like, why are all these people getting this?
Exactly.
And you find out, where did you grow up? Oh, okay, well, in the area. Oh.
And who pays for their medical care? They do, out of their pocket, and they didn't cause that.
Yeah, this could be huge, very huge. Once this starts getting traction and people find out, and they don't want to, sweep it under the rug because they can't, this is going to be huge.
Well, yeah, but your government is now in the defense mode, preventing that from happening. 6 months ago, I could have called the TV station. I could have been on TV, down at the studio giving an interview, and they would have gladly talked to me. Now I can't get through to anybody over there. They've turned the phones off. It's a change in attitude, and somebody's causing this, and that's what's got to be examined. Who was trying to stuff the story out?
Yeah.
Because those are the evil people. They're really evil.
They're thinking about the bottom line and money and all that, and, what an impact it's going to have on the economy. But good grief. Doesn't the health of people have to count above that? And the cost of healthcare is phenomenal. And yet they're helping to cause that to be driven up.
Well, these people are poor that live by the mill, so big business considers them expendable.
Well, I
Their
understand
life
that,
doesn't mean anything, and that's the evil part.
That is very evil, but they're also, if they're poor, they're probably on Medicaid, and that is like a state-funded thing too, and has its own,
That's how they treated these people that lived along the river where this pollution happened. They're expendable. Their life doesn't mean anything.
Well,
and that's how they were treated.
I've done a lot of research on human experimentation, and there was, things that they did to cities on purpose just to study what the ramifications would be. And so I have to kind of wonder if maybe that might be playing into this. I know it's a bit of a stretch, and so I'm not really going to be really thoroughly endorsing that until we got, more evidence, one way or another. But, like there have been things like the 50s was rife with, the government doing things like that. And then it went through the 70s, like MK Ultra and all this stuff. And if you look these up, you'll find that a lot of records are now declassified, and you can look and see it. But, it just makes me wonder if this was one of those instances where it's like, okay, this bad thing happened, but let's see what the effects are and not tell anyone that it did. Or, whether it was deliberate or not. And when they were, you said that the government was involved in them deliberately putting stuff into the river. That's what made me think, gosh, I wonder if they are doing some sort of underground study and they don't want anyone to know because, people would move away.
Well, the state doesn't want another PBB crisis with their food, so I could see where they're trying to snuff out the effects of PFAS on getting in the food supply because they don't need another black eye and billions of dollars in lawsuits and everything. And another thing that scares these officials is that they have 6 officials in Flint that are on indicted for manslaughter over the Flint water crisis. So anybody that's an investigator gets scared thinking that they could get indicted because they didn't say anything in the past. So that's caused them to clam up and not cooperate either. And I think that happens a lot. It's like, oh, I knew something about that, and I didn't say. Now I'm going to get indicted if it was shown that it caused cancer in people and people died. I think there's a real fear in the state government that could happen.
Yeah. But, people have a right to know. And
people have a right to know.
Yeah, and you can't make an informed decision if you aren't informed. And some people are going to not want to know because it's going to have, once you know, then you either do something about it in some way or you don't. But some people are the kind where it's easier to live not knowing something, and they don't want to know. But I think the majority of people, if given the chance or the choice, they would rather know what's going on and try to be a voice with other people to make change, to bring it to light.
That's what my partnership does. It's awareness. It's we're clean water advocates, and we're advocates for a good, safe environment. That's all we want is awareness. We're not after money. We're not after fame. We just want to tell the story, good, bad, or indifferent.
Well, and I know somebody that has, and this is a little bit off topic, but it also has to do with possible, like government interference. I don't know, but people that have electric cars, they go to a station, like a charging station, and they don't work. And they're like, they ask the people, like if it's at a service station or a dealership, and they're like, oh, that hasn't worked in months. But they're required to have one. They're required to have the charging station. It's just they're not required to have it operational. And that's frustrating because everybody's trying to do what they can for the environment. You get an electric car, you expect that you're going to be able to help the environment with it, help your bottom line with paying for less gas, and then boom, you can't find one that works.
Well, I hope what I said helps today, and I'm hoping to raise awareness. And I love your show, and I appreciate you for letting me speak on this. This is great.
Yeah, thank you so much for coming. I'm looking forward to working with you outside and with the show, and hopefully we can do a live show where we're walking the grounds. And Barbara, you're welcome to join us and see firsthand.
I would love to. I would love to, and I'm going to spread the word.
Thank you. Yeah, because this isn't just the Michigan thing. This is just what we know.
And why does the government got to be so secretive and try to control the situation? That's what happened here. is the DEQ tried to control the situation, and they didn't want citizens investigating, but they failed, and they failed miserably because we know. And they're trying to control it, but they haven't succeeded all the way. They blocked a lot of pathways, but we're still getting the word out, and we're still fighting.
Yeah, and if we could do a live show, from there, it'll definitely, I think, help raise awareness, because when you see something, you can't unsee it.
I can't wait to show you this site, Kelly. You'll be saying this is like Chernobyl.
Oh man, yeah, I'm looking forward to it. It's just sad that the whole thing happened, and the aftermath is just horrendous. And the fact that it's so hard to get the information, it's so hard to try to put a stop to it and fix it however we could. Had they been open in the beginning and said, "Oh gosh, this happened," and let's do something, then it wouldn't have gotten to this point.
So yeah, let's plan on maybe a future show soon, and you can see it for your own eyes, and then we can do a more detailed visual thing of it. That sounds like a perfect plan.
Excellent. Yeah, thank you. I'm really excited that we're getting this more off the ground, and that you've put in all the work that you have, and we're going to get this out there, because once it's out there, they can't deny it. I mean, it's going to be like, hey, look, this is what we've got. What are we going to do? How do we fix this?
Yep, whether we label the site and put signs up, have it fenced off, that's a start.
Yeah.
But we just can't leave the site and not fix it, because I think that would be fundamentally wrong.
Well, and you have people that are hunting deer and different things, and the deer don't know not to go over there. And, they don't see property lines and know, okay, well, we're not going to eat over here and drink this water. So, I mean, it's something that is fluid. It's something that doesn't know boundaries. And water doesn't know boundaries.
And,
right.
Well, thank you for letting me be on the show, and I've got to get going, but
okay.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Chris.
Thank you, everybody, for coming on.
Yes.
Thank you, Barbara.
Thank you. You are welcome.
Thanks, everyone.
This was an amazing, this was an amazing show. I'm going to do everything I